the First Home Super Saver Scheme.
I don't think many people are aware of a scheme like this. But the scheme was designed purely to help the first home buyers enter into the market, just to help them get that leg up into the property ladder. So I think the scheme does help and does contribute quite well.
How often would you see somebody pay tax on the money they want to pull out for the purchase?
99.99% of the time, you're still always better off structuring it that way. Because you're, in a way, yes, you're going to be paying some taxes when you come to draw it out, but at the same time as well, you're going to be disciplined and you're not going to be able to touch that money, because that's probably where a lot of people struggle the most.
And I've spoken to a lot of people who have either been divorced, lost property through bankruptcy, all those criteria, and they think that's it, it's the end. But it's not necessarily the case. Hello and welcome to another episode of From Why to Wealth. I welcome our guests, and you can say veterans of the financial planning industry, Regmi and Dean Desoukey from Ryker Capital. Gentlemen, it's been a long time.
It has been a long time, Gav.
It's very rare we come around a round table. Not a rectangle table, so to speak. What brings us here today? Funny story time. I had one of my son's mates come up to me. It was probably about 6 weeks ago. And he comes out and goes, I've been watching your reels and your podcast. And I said, that's good news. He goes, can I ask you a question? I go, absolutely. And he goes to me, how do I save money? First thing I said to him was super.
Right. Well, firstly, thanks for having us, Gabs. It's a very interesting question, isn't it? I mean, like, for a 14 or 15-year-old to come up to you and go, look, I love it, and I want to sort of understand how money works and how do I start saving?
And it wasn't the question, how does money work, start saving? But you're right. It was...
Because ultimately, it is about how money works. So for you have to understand your relationship with money. And once you understand the relationship with money, and at that early age, for him to sort of be asking that questions, I think that's brilliant.
Correct. No, but it'll make a big difference as well, right? So obviously, when you start at a younger age, right, it talks volume. So that's good.
100%. And money to me is a relationship, but it's about the micro speed and the macro patience. So in the micro, it's funny, I was having this conversation this morning. Would you skydive every day?
No.
It's once in a lifetime.
I'd love to, but
no.
I'm just scared of heights, mate. I won't be doing that.
I've only done it once and I enjoyed it. I'm like,
okay. But
might take that as a degree.
You do it and then you get it out of your system. But on a macro level, you're not going to do it on a regular basis. Some do, they're thrill seekers, but that's where the macro patience comes into play with money. It's a long game, right? And it comes down to, and I thought to myself, financial literacy lacks within the education system, and we're here to educate people. And it came to mind that at a young age, at 14, 15, for him to ask that question, it brought me to the point of why we're here today about the First Home Super Saver Scheme, which is a tongue twister. And this is my thought process on all this is when you've got a savings account, and like pens up, we've all faltered with this, you're saving 30 cents in a dollar. For every dollar you make, you save 30 cents. That's 30%, right? Yeah. Yes, simple math, I get it. But you're more likely to touch your savings, right? Christmas, registration, whatever it may be. But when it's in your super, and the government allows you to do this, it's within your super, the likeliness of you wanting to go through the process of withdrawing the money, the worst case scenario is you'll stop, but what you've done to get it to that point. So if I just touch on the basic fundamentals of how it works, and then we can elaborate on that. And the First Home Super Saver Scheme works through voluntary contributions. So what it is your eligible individuals can make voluntary contributions before tax or after tax into your super. Your maximum contributions, which from my understanding is $15,000 per financial year, and total $50,000 under the scheme. The withdrawals when ready to buy a home. So this First Home Super Saver Scheme is predominantly for people who want to buy their first home.
Correct. But this is where the goals and aspirations comes really
correct.
Important for that person that you're speaking to, and highlighting the fact, well, what is your goal and aspiration with money? Sorry, just going back to a point there, Gabs. It is very important for that a person to understand that my 5-year goal is to buy this asset or is to buy a property. So when you're sort of entering into that part of the scheme, whether we talk about concessional, non-concessional, which is pre or post-tax contributions, what is my aspiration? How far down the track am I going to be to look to purchasing that property?
It's great that you said that, because the segue into that is micro speed, macro patience. The micro speed is month in, month out, quarter in, quarter out, getting to that 15,000. Hey, Ray, Dean, I can't quite make the contribution for this month. Can I make it up for the following month? And then there's the macro patients where you know your goal at 15, hypothetically, your goal by the time you're 20 is to have that 50,000 in there. Then there are other schemes which we can touch on in future podcasts whereby you've done half the yards. Just the thought process and the behavior of saving is, some people don't quite understand the concept because they live in the micro, which is let me just spend now. And the other thing is just with the tax benefits as well. So the superannuation contributions are taxed at a lower 15%. And this scheme allows buyer to save more efficiently compared to regular savings accounts. And there's eligibility criteria. So you must be a first home buyer. You must intend to live in the property. Must apply for the release of funds before signing a contract to buy or build. Now I'll hand it over to you guys as specialists. I mean, we were talking briefly prior to this. You do have some case studies or you have work, yeah? So I'd like you guys to share that, and either or, jump in, but it's quite an interesting.
It is a very fantastic scheme. Look, I'll start with my case study first, and I'll pass it over to Dean. In my situation, the clients weren't quite that young, because essentially what we wanted to sort of determine before they go into that scheme is that money doesn't get locked away from them. And what I mean by that is if their goals and aspirations changes within that 5-year time frame, the money's gone, well, you can't essentially withdraw it. So that's the big thing you got to think about prior to entering into this scheme.
When I say a 15-year-old came ask me the question, it was more or less trying to make them understand how important and how you can have super work for you. So yeah, I don't think a 15-year-old will go into the mindset, I want to buy a property by 20. But again, everything starts at a young age, right? So what you're saying is,
and they may not be super, but there might be other things that their 15-year-old could do.
Perfect. Great. Now let's just assume a 20, 21-year-old, they start contributing for the scheme. You're saying there's a time frame for it.
There's a 5-year time frame for that scheme. So essentially what you're trying to do is, in my case study, I had a couple who've just started their full-time role. They had a aspiration to buy a property, and they sort of had somewhat of their life planned out. So they wanted to start with the very ground basics, which is, let's start with the budget. And I think that's key. That's the paramount thing, that if you don't start with the budget, you don't know what you're saving, you don't know what you're adding into it.
But you also, as well, you don't know how much you can save as well.
Exactly.
So you'll find a lot of the time, especially when I do a lot of budgeting stuff with clients, people would be like to me, oh yeah, I can save around about $200-300 a week. And then when you really dig into the actual budget planner, you might find that they should be saving $500-600, but the rest of the money is going for discretional spending. So
exactly.
Discretional spending, that's
I'm sure you see a lot of that in the bank statement.
Sure do. But each heart out. But yeah, so you've got that 5 years.
Yeah. So essentially, with again, going back to a couple of scenarios, they were earning, I think the gentleman was earning about roughly around $130,000 there. His partner was earning, she was in roughly about 90. So the gentleman was earning, paying $130, earning a tax of roughly around $28,000. So the idea for us was, and again, this was based on their circumstances, very, very important that you sort of flushed that out with the advisor that you're working with. So the idea that we sort of worked with was we sort of got them to invest that money throughout the course of the year. And in June, particularly what we'd do before the end of the financial year, we would make sure, and again, we've got to make sure the super fund also is eligible for that scheme, that they allow for that fund to sacrifice that amount of money, or what we would do is make a lump sum contribution of $15,000, which is what's allowed throughout the course of the year, and we would claim that as a tax deduction in July.
If I can hold your thought process there. So you would like, and everybody's scenario is different, but every case study is different. So none of this is maybe relevant to certain circumstances, right?
Please seek help from an advisor.
Yes. I've got 2 guys, so. But so you would tend to recommend or advise to go, don't do it monthly, wait until the financially. That's what I'm asking.
No, so it could be either or. It could be monthly where they don't have a particular savings habit. I think it's great to do that. But in this particular couple's case, we wanted them to sort of make a bit of earnings. So we were trying to create 2-prong approach here. We were trying not only create a savings outside in their bank account, but also create a savings in the super. So we wanted to really accelerate that process of them buying a property in 5 years' time versus trying to do that in 3 years' time, and really build up that savings for their dream house. So not only we got them to save outside, but also in June, what we particularly get them to do is make that contribution of 15K. And in July, they'd go and claim that as a tax deduction. And they were very excited about that because in July, when they go to the accountant, once the notice of intent and all of that's been lodged, they'll go, I've made a contribution of $15,000. I'd like to claim that as a tax deduction. So now all of a sudden, this gentleman received a nice little $4,000 check back. Mind you, obviously that contribution is obviously taxed 15% on the way in, but on the return side, you also got some of the money as a tax deduction. You've received that on your bank account. So that adds to your saving again. And then they start all over again the next year with the cycle. So if they receive $4,000, then they'll start to save another good chunk of $11,000 for the next year.
Or they could throw that $4,000 into a non-super savings account, say in your normal e-saver account, particular banks, save the other $15,000, and then the following year, your 4 turns to 8, not including the interest that you've earned on that 4.
Exactly.
And then by the end of the 5 years, 4 5s are 20, and whatever change you've got from the savings.
But don't forget, in this instance, both couple were doing it together, so they've built up a good amount of savings.
8 times 5 on top of the 50 you've put away.
Yes, but don't forget, you can only take out up to $50,000.
Correct. But what I'm trying to get at is, if they're getting, for example, $4,000 each in their return, that's $8,000 times that by 5 years. And in addition to that, your combined $15,000, let's just say.
Yeah. So $15,000 minus the tax. So you've got that amount. But don't forget, you also got the associated earnings. So it's $50,000 over 5 years, what you can take out, plus whatever that associated earnings that money has made over that period of time.
How many of these would you say that you guide clients through on an annual basis?
So we're starting to see a lot more of it. And as more and more first home buyers are being pushed out of the market, I feel a little bit, they are sort of taking some of these strategies, approaches that they've got, that government's allowed to get an understanding of those quite a bit. So we are seeing the numbers ramp up quite a bit on the first home super saver scheme. But again, like I said, it's going back to each individual strategy. Some are getting help from the parents. Some have the propensity to save quite a bit. Some are university graduates who have just come out of university on very high paying jobs. So there's a lot more of that we're seeing in different shapes and forms.
But let's be frank, when you've been studying for 4 or 5 years, your fear of the HECS debt crumbles you. And the theory is some pay it through their pay slips that I see, but some just wait for their tax return at the end of the financial year. Predominantly self-employed do it because you can't help it if you're a POIG on 150 plus. And there's some people finishing uni and going to those roles, right? It crumbles their fear. It creates some form of anxiety that I've got this debt with me forever, and the house is all of a sudden not a priority to purchase. And then we're seeing a lot of, hey, I've got 100,000 in savings. It's not enough. Use mum and dad's house as a guarantee. And the parents are always happy to help. But this is another opportunity. Within 5 years, you can achieve that goal.
You can. Not only that, but what we've also sort of seen very interesting scenario whereby the interest rate that some of these guys were paying on this HECS debt was quite significant. They've refied the whole lot out. So when they sort of purchased their home, they looked at the option to go, well, why don't I just pay that debt off as well?
On that, we tend to say to clients, if you've got the opportunity to do it, because now the banks sort of changed their thought process on, for a self-employed applicant, potentially earning 50 grand. The self-employed applicants thought, I'm smart, I'll put my tax notice of assessment under 51. We don't pay HECS on that basis. But now the banks are going, great, ATO may see that, but your company's made 200,000 profits. So guess what? We work you out on 250,000 income.
But we're not suggesting any tax avoidance here, but obviously...
I'm giving an example. No, we're not. What I'm trying to get at is, you are right.
You don't want Anthony Albanese here.
But by you rolling that into your loan, you've got the ability of paying that soon at a lower rate. That's the point I'm trying to get at.
But also as well, your income gets freed up as well. Obviously, because what happens is a lot of the time when you're paying HECS,
the borrowing capacity. But that's what I was trying to get at. You're 250,000 taxable income now. So I'm now telling clients, why don't you look at the option of paying that out? So if you borrow the money from your company or you refinance it, it's going to be borrowed money because there's no way you're going to take 30,000 and pay 30% tax. You'd say, right, thank you for the loan company. We're going to now pay you $1,000 a month, pay it out, and I can do that over 7-year term. That's how they look at it.
This is a question for you, Gab, because obviously we're not mortgage brokers, we're financial planners. I don't know how, buying a first home, is it a possibility that they can actually take money out? Because obviously there is no equity in the property.
And this is where borrowing is affected, where That's why I alluded back to the 250,000, where they're now considering your HEX, although he's not paying it because his notice of assessment shows 8,000, it's $2,000 a month you're paying towards your HEX debt. And that's not the case. So there are lenders out there that know back 20 years ago, they used to do 105, 110% borrowing. Now they say that you are able, I believe there's 1 or 2 lenders out there that'll go, we'll give you 100% of cost if you're using a guarantee, plus you can refinance a couple of your liabilities. And do you encourage that? Because a HEX debt is not something that you pay monthly.
As you can appreciate, obviously, we're not mortgage brokers, so essentially our job is to sort of technically create strategies for them. We don't incorporate or talk about the HEX debt particularly. I mean, like, whilst we do address that in the part of cash flow and the accessibility, I think this is where the nature of an advisor and mortgage broker working together becomes quite imperative, because ultimately you are tag teaming and working out a strategy that's going to be best suited for that client in that circumstances.
And Dean and I were just touching on it a little while ago, where although you're making these contributions of 15,000 to your super over a 5-year period, the bank obviously sees it. But seeing that it's additional contribution to your employer, you can add that back as income because it can be stopped at any time. So once you start the scheme, you're not locked in, like you have to do it. It's imperative. It's a choice. You can't stop it at any time.
You can stop at any time, but just means that obviously the maximum that you can withdraw is $50,000.
But it has to be for the home.
Has to be for the purchase of your first home.
You can't go 4 years in and go, I've made an additional 15,000 per year for 4 years. I want my money back.
No. So the way it would work in that regards is whenever you are looking to purchase a property, you need to put a determination in with the ATO. And I think that's very important because there are considerations that obviously it does take time for the ATO to do the determination, because you're not only calculating from their perspective what funds can be withdrawn out, but also the associated earnings that's associated with that amount of money or the contribution that's gone in. And you also got to keep that in mind, because obviously whenever you're taking the money out, there's obviously taxes that you pay. You do get a 30% tax offset. However, it is key to sort of work through what that number particularly would look like for you. Usually you can work that out through statement by statement for that course of financial year, but it'd be very hard to apportion that amount of money and then apportion that earnings on that rate of the money.
So let's talk simple terms. I've put 50,000 in, macro game, all right? Of 5th year, pick up the phone, call one of your boys and go, I've put 50,000 in. I now found a home. I've had a pre-approval. I want to withdraw that money out, because you'd have to give the bank some sort of indication that they got the deposit. Now, that 30% that you pay in tax to get it out, or you get it offset. Sorry, I apologize. So how would it work out? How does it look like on a 50,000, or let's call it simple terms, for every dollar that you want to pull out at the 5th year, how would it look like?
Now, that would be very hard to calculate, because that individual, we've got to have a look at not only their level of income that they've earned over that course of the period of time and when they're taking that money out. So let's just say if I've earned $100,000 that year and I'm about to take out 50,000 plus associated earnings, and that would be, let's just say, another 10 as an example, or perhaps 15, then there's $65,000. So my level of income has obviously gone up to 165. Now you get the 30% tax offset on that, but we'll just have to sort of work to the figures to understand what that individual person would be able to
so
withdraw.
You get taxed on your own money.
Well, you don't forget income, but you're claiming that as a tax deduction at the same time. Now, there's 2 forms of contribution you can do. You can either do it as a form of pre-tax and post-tax. Now, obviously, in other words, the way in the superannuation legislation world it works is what they call it is a concessional and a non-concessional. Non-concessional after tax, concessional pre-tax. What that variant would be, we'll have to work that out at that point in time. Obviously, concessional works a little bit better because obviously you're able to sort of write that off against your tax to get a bit of a tax return money back and create further savings.
How often would you see somebody pay tax on the money they want to pull out for the purchase?
There is a tax component that comes into it, but once again, like Ray's alluded to as well, there's several factors that it comes down to.
Geez, you guys are politicians.
No, but it's true though.
We're just going to be careful.
It is. No, because the thing is as well, it comes down to your individual tax bracket, what you're paying. But at the end of the day, 99.99% of the time, you're still always better off structuring it that way. Right? Because you're in a way, yes, you're going to be paying some taxes when you come to draw it out, but at the same time as well, you're going to be disciplined and you're not going to be able to touch that money, because that's probably where a lot of people struggle the most.
Discipline have it.
100%. Like I've got a client recently where they've come in and she said to me, look, I want to buy something, but for some reason, every time I get to 15,000, it just dwindles away.
And
then it goes back up to 15 again, right? So this is a great strategy for her where it allow her to basically save that money and not really be able to access it until she buys something. Then also as well, while she's saving that, and as Ray was mentioning earlier, you're getting that tax deduction. So coming tax time, you're getting a little bit more money back into your pocket. And then at the same time as well, it's just going to allow you to get to that goal a lot faster.
Layman's terms, over the years, the 4,000 analogy, we're putting the 4,000 away. You could literally, from me, I know you can't advise because the politicians are on a good behavior today. You would say, let's assume that I'm going to be paying on an average of 2,000 a year back to taxman. So at the end of the 5 years when you pull out, I'm just giving an example, right? Because obviously your income started, when you started doing this, your income was 110, hypothetically. Your tax bracket's low. Then by the time you come to pull it out, you've had multiple promotions and your income's now the 150, 160, which means your tax bracket's increased a bit. So to not lose myself in all this, your tax will be determined on your earnings at the time where you pull the money out. But that money you've been getting return for making the contributions, we said touched at roughly 4,000. You would assume some of that is, once I do my tax return, I could owe some money to the tax.
No, you're getting money paid every year. So if again, depending on what's in your tax return, you're getting a tax refund.
No, correct. But when you decide to pull the 50 back out, you may possibly be taxed. That's considered income.
Correct, but you also get 30% tax offset. So you might be potentially up for the amount of tax, but it will all depend on what form of concessional and non-concessional contributions you make.
Correct. So at the end of the 5 years, hypothetically, you owe 5,000 in tax. At least over that 5 years, the 4,000 return you've been getting.
Always.
That's what I'm trying to get at.
Correct.
So you can answer that one.
Yes.
But I will say this, and it wasn't until you read in depth in respect to the scheme that people out there are saying, you know what, I've recently gone bankrupt. I can't be put in this position. But some of the eligibility criterias may, subject to your personal circumstances, you may potentially qualify or be eligible if due to financial hardship. And we were talking about this before. So some of the financial hardships would be the events that could result in the loss of property interest, including bankruptcy, divorce, loss of employment, illness, being affected by a natural disaster. I think that's a massive opportunity. And I've spoken to a lot of people who have either been divorced or lost property through bankruptcy, all those criteria, and they think that's it, it's the end. But it's not necessarily the case.
No. Look, I think the government has an assessment program whereby they can have a look at the qualifying criteria. And if you've gone through a severe hardship, they do want to support the people in order to be getting ahead into that property ladder or perhaps purchasing their first property and start all over again. So I think it's a fantastic scheme that you have eligibility to re-enter the market utilizing the same scheme. And I think it's a massive leg up.
I would love one day for us to be sitting in front of schools
and educating them on it.
And look, I totally understand the energy levels from a 14, 15-year-old to say, hey, I'm going to open up a super account is nothing in comparison. Like if I was to tell my 15-year-old self, what would you do differently? It was probably to think long-term and be savvy.
Yeah, definitely.
Right. I understand when you're young and earning an income, you think you're invincible and it's going to fall off trees and we're going to continue one of these ones. But in reality, I am of the theory that by the time my kids are 67, there may be no super. So I apologize, no pensions paid. Who knows?
Most likely, yeah.
And look, again, I'm like, you just don't know what the scheme would look like from year to year because there could be completely different governments.
The scheme that we discuss is as of 2025, and who knows if it's going to change and how it's going to change. But I personally believe that I think this is probably brought on a little bit post-COVID, whereby you could pull out of your super for hardship, right? But I mean, they've got to somehow.
But the scheme was designed purely to help the first home buyers enter into the market, just to help them get that leg up into the property ladder. So I think the scheme does help and does contribute quite well. And I don't think many people are aware of a scheme like this. So being one of many schemes, this scheme certainly helps the first home buyers really sort of build up that savings, especially if you're a couple. You can really expedite that in 3 years' time to be, rather than 5, to get into that stage.
So that 50,000, oh no, sorry, it's separate. Okay.
Is individual.
Okay, I just want to, before we go off on a recap, I just want to say that you did touch on some super accounts may not allow you to do this kind of, or will have this scheme. Is it the same with the banks where not a lot of banks do the first home loan deposit scheme. Off topic here a moment, but you're saying some super accounts don't allow you to do it?
Yes, look, I think you might want to check with your scheme. I think firstly, if they're eligible or not. I'm like, there are a couple of schemes like defined benefits and things like that that may or may not allow that sort of structure. So I think it's very, very important to firstly check with your super fund. But particularly, I think working with an advisor would be the big part, because obviously he can make the determination. He can work out a bit of a structure and a strategy. Because if you're going to enter into the scheme, you're going to start from the cash flow. You're going to absolutely have to start from the cash flow. You're going to have the disciplined approach during that period of time to build this up over a period of time.
It's the disciplined approach to say no.
Correct.
No to that extra drink, no to that extra burger, whatever it may be, right?
But it's funny you say that. It's not that. Like every time I have a discussion with clients when we're completing budget planners, a lot of the time it's like I say to them, look, I'm not here to stop you from having that lovely coffee that you like going every Sunday or anything like that. It's more around just pretty much just restructuring everything so that you can still do some of the stuff that you want to do, but at the same time as well, make sure you're on your journey to success. Make sure you're on your financial journey to where you want to be.
We certainly don't want to put them on a diet.
Yeah,
That's a lifestyle. No, because I say it all the time.
It's always when he said that, I'm like going, you're about to put me on a diet.
Well, it's like when people say, do you know how soon you can pay off your mortgage if you have one less coffee a day? Why are you taking away my happiness?
I know. And
I'm asking for one coffee a day. I don't smoke, I don't gamble. Generally speaking, people say that, right? So
you definitely got to enjoy your moments, or at the same time you also got to realize going, oh, I'm a little bit off track here. Let me start that again. It's okay to go off track. Happens all the time.
It's like a personal trainer when I engage in a nutritionist.
Correct. It's a
Why are you
discipline
engaging in your nutritionist? I want accountability. A financial advisor / planner's accountability. A mortgage broker or going to a bank. Why would you need a mortgage broker or a bank? For example, it's the accountability piece. How do you help me? And brokers having 70% market share now are more or less along the lines of, particularly after 2017 when the best interest duty came in. We are here to help our clients.
Absolutely.
And educate them. And this is what this is all about. But gentlemen, I guess the first home loan super saver scheme, it's a bit of a tongue twister. It does come down, if I was to recap our conversation, is please, I recommend that you speak to a financial advisor. Ray and Dean are always willing and available to talk. Speak to your current super to see if this kind of a scheme is eligible under their criteria. But again, micro speed, macro patience. Speak to your financial advisor now. And look, I mean no disrespect, but mum and dad, brother, sister. But it's true. I always have the conversation. Oh, well, mum told me or dad told me. I'm a parent, so you don't know what you don't know, and it's okay to say speak to a specialist. So,
but you've got, at the end of the day, I always say to people as well, you've got nothing to lose to just have a chat with a specialist and see what your options are. So.
And the other part on the eligibility side, you must intend to live on the property, and the key word is intend.
Correct. We discussed that eligibility at the beginning, but
and on that, obviously, when on the determination side, try and apply for the determination a lot earlier prior to entering into the contract. And I think that's a key important part, because sometimes it will take a little while for you to determine that. So you don't want to leave that to the very last minute to release of the funds. So you might want to start before even looking to sign the contract. Try 2 weeks, 3 weeks earlier.
What would you recommend at the same time you're looking at a pre-approval to start engaging in your advisor? Okay, there you go. And that usually happens when you go for the pre-approvals. Usually, I want to buy. The intention is to buy. So you'll speak to a broker. And like us, we've teamed up with Ryker Capital and have a chat with them. And then the process starts from there.
And also there's cases in the event, what happens if you didn't end up winning the contract, or you didn't end up settling on the property. That's another big caveat right there. So under the provision, you might have to return the funds back and start all over again, where you sort of, you can sort of reapply to have the funds released.
And that's done with you guys. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Gabs. Thank you for having us.
Appreciate it. And I'm sure we'll do this again. So exciting to sit with Ryker Capital, have a conversation about all things first home super saver scheme. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Gabs.
Appreciate it.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the podcast from Why to Wealth. You can find us on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Just search the Finance Co group or see the link in the description. Remember, everything in this podcast is general discussion and information and is not to be taken as financial advice. Always see a professional, as everyone's circumstances are going to be unique.